There is a silent, ancient tax on the human soul that most people pay every single day without even realizing it. We are taught that discipline is a cage, a cold iron structure built to imprison our desires. We look at the high achiever, the polymath, or the stoic, and we assume they simply have a higher tolerance for pain. But what if I told you that the most brilliant minds in history weren't tougher than you? They were simply keeping a secret. Deep within the archives of cognitive psychology lies a forgotten mechanism, a way to bypass the prefrontal cortex's exhaustion entirely. It isn't about forcing yourself to do what you hate. It's about a psychological pivot that makes the struggle feel like a reward. Most will never find this pivot. They will spend their lives fighting their own biology and losing. Today, we pull back the velvet curtain. We will explore the 5 pillars of cognitive seduction. But be warned. Point number 5 is the most dangerous. It is the great erosion, the only technique that makes the others work, but the one that will fundamentally change how you view your own identity forever. Chapter 1. The Dopamine Mirage. Imagine a scholar in a 19th century library surrounded by the scent of old parchment and flickering candlelight. To an outsider, he is suffering in isolation. To him, he is on the hunt. The average brain is wired to seek cheap dopamine, the instant spike from a notification or a sugary snack. But intelligent people practice what we call dopamine decoupling. They don't wait for the reward at the end of the task. They trick the brain into releasing dopamine during the friction itself. They treat the effort as the aesthetic. The burning in the mind during a complex problem becomes the signal of growth, not a signal to stop. They have turned the wall into the door. But how do you actually rewire a biological circuit that has been evolving for millions of years? To do that, you must stop being the laborer and start being the architect. Chapter 2. The architect versus the laborer. Most people approach tasks as laborers. They see a mountain of work and feel the weight of every stone. The intelligent mind, however, adopts the architect's gaze. They don't do work. They design systems where work is the path of least resistance. This is based on the identity shift theory. The secret isn't saying, I need to study. The secret is believing, I am the type of person who finds peace in the library. When your actions align with your identity, discipline ceases to be a choice and becomes a necessity of your being. You aren't forcing yourself to be disciplined. You are simply refusing to be someone else. But even an architect needs a sanctuary. And in the modern world, the greatest sanctuary is one most people are terrified to enter. The void. Chapter 3. The Sanctuary of Boredom. Why is it that our best ideas come to us in the shower or during a long, silent walk? In the dark academia of the mind, silence is the ultimate luxury. We live in an era of synthetic stimulation, where every gap in our day is filled with noise. Intelligent people trick their brains into liking discipline by making the alternative, absolute boredom, the only other option. They starve the brain of cheap input until the difficult task of reading a complex philosophy tome becomes the most interesting thing in the room. They don't make the work easier. They make the rest more grueling. If you sit in a room with nothing but a pen and a blank page, eventually, the page begins to speak. But what happens when the page remains silent? What happens when the ritual itself becomes the only thing holding you together? Chapter 4. The Ritual of the Inkwell. In the shadows of history, rituals were used to summon the gods. In psychology, we use them to summon the flow state. Environmental cues are the invisible threads that pull at our subconscious. An intelligent person doesn't rely on feeling motivated. They rely on the sensory trigger. The specific smell of a certain tea, the weight of a particular fountain pen, the exact track of ambient cello music. By anchoring these sensory experiences to deep work, they create a Pavlovian response. The moment the tea is poured, the brain recognizes the atmosphere of effort and shuts down the urge to procrastinate. But rituals can become crutches. What happens when the tea runs out? What happens when the ritual fails? That brings us to the final, most haunting realization, the one I warned you about. Chapter 5. The Great Erosion. We have arrived at the Great Erosion, the most dangerous technique of all. To truly trick your brain into liking discipline, you must eventually kill the self that wants to quit. In classical philosophy, this is the amor fati, the love of fate. Intelligent people don't just tolerate the hard path, they erode the boundary between their pleasure and their pain. They stop asking, "How do I feel about this task?" and start realizing that how they feel is entirely irrelevant to the objective reality of the work. This is the dangerous secret, because it requires a certain coldness, a detachment from the emotional whims of the ego. Once you realize your feelings are just chemical weather patterns that have no power over your hands, you become unstoppable. You are no longer a slave to your moods. You are the master of the clock. Discipline is not a burden. It is the only true form of freedom. Everything else is just a shorter leash. The question is, are you ready to let the old version of yourself erode so the architect can finally begin to build?